My name is Jacob, and welcome to another episode of Raw and Uncut on the Abrasive Conversations platform. In this episode, I would like to talk about the national dialogue. So, the national dialogue has started, and there has been many commentary thus far with regards to the national dialogue. A number of developments also took place. One of them is that the legacy organizations have withdrawn from the national dialogue. Now, since that has happened, Musi Maimane came out and asked them to come back to the conversation and the national dialogue. But since all of this started, when it was announced earlier, I asked myself this question: what's the point of a national dialogue? Now, before I get into it, there might be people who believe that this is an opportunity for the ANC to increase the electoral support in the 2026 local government elections. So I gave that a little bit thought, if this could possibly be the case. But before I go into the conversation, and this conversation happened between me and Danielle, there is an image that stood out for me as the results were announced in 2024. And it was Gwede Mantashe looking up like this to the election results board of the IEC, and it was dumbfounded that the ANC would struggle at that particular point to get to a 40% majority. It's with that image that I want to start this conversation. So I asked Danielle several questions because I have such strong opinions. So sometimes it helps me to balance the conversation. So the conversation is not just one-sided. So one of the first questions I asked her, what is the national dialogue and what is it supposed to achieve? What's the point of the national dialogue? And this is what Danielle had to say.
So from what I've been able to glean, my understanding is that South Africa is now 30 years into its democracy. And our responsibility as South African citizens is to evaluate this democracy, see what has worked well, what needs improvement, and how do we make those improvements. So we need to convene within our respective spaces, and we need to identify areas that are of priority to us. We need to find common ground between ourselves, and we need to then work towards solutions that are acceptable for everyone and inclusive of everyone. So this national dialogue process is a space that's supposed to be citizen-led, but it is a space where citizens are meant to convene together to discuss issues that are of importance to them and work towards finding a solution in partnership with government and other sectors of society, of course.
So I want to make an important highlight from Danielle's responses, and that is that this national dialogue is supposed to evaluate democracy. Now, for many people, when we talk about democracy as a system, it might only mean elections. So it means the election participation, and then your parliament, your local councils, and the representatives or the public officials that we then create is democracy, and we leave the system like that. But democracy is more than just elections. It's a system that is held together by various factors. The needs of the people, the needs of businesses, the needs of an international system that we operate in. So all of that informs the type of democracy that the country has. And the evaluation thereof is where is it? Can be compared to other types of democracies? What is the living standard in this democracy compared to to others. So that's the evaluation part that Danielle's point to. So if that's one of the ways, then I say good shot for or kudos for the attempts by the government of national unity to start a conversation like this in South Africa. So the next question I had for Danielle is, does she expect that there would be any new insights coming from the national dialogue? And this is what Danielle had to say.
Yeah, so truthfully, I don't really foresee any new insights emerging per se. As a bit of a background, I am a dialogue practitioner in the Sustained Dialogues program at the IJR, and I have worked in about 8 of the 9 provinces in this country in different communities with different kinds of people. And in my work, what I found is that South Africans have a generally good grasp of what the issues are that this country faces. They understand it very well. Those issues are poverty and unemployment, crime, safety and security, gender-based violence, what else? Corruption, an inadequate education system that doesn't meet the needs of our learners. People generally understand very well what the issues are. So I don't see any new insights emerging with regards to that. What I think will be interesting to witness is how people approach these issues. I think we might find some newness there. So I'll give an example. We can all collectively agree that poverty is an urgent crisis in this country that needs urgent attention, right? But people's understanding of what poverty is in itself, how we got here, why we have such pronounced levels of poverty in our country. Does poverty affect one demographic more than others? And if so, why? People's understanding with regards to the challenges that they are able to identify differs. So I think we might see a bit of that coming out of this dialogue process. Yes, we can agree that poverty and unemployment is an urgent crisis within South Africa, but how we approach it is going to be quite different. It's going to be informed by our backgrounds and about how we've been socialized in this country through our identities. So that will be more interesting to witness, and I think we'll see some newness emerging from that.
I agree with Danielle. Citizens have a good grasp of what is happening in this country. Even government knows what is happening in this government in this country, because they have to draw up plans, and those plans has to reflect their budget. So they cannot just decide on a budget and then give government money and government departments. There need to be a need that they have to address. So people really do have a good grasp of what is happening in South Africa. So if people have a good grasp of what is happening in South Africa, the more important question for me, why isn't there actionable plans towards these particular plans that was already developed? Is there any types of solutions that would come from this? So I asked Danielle the question, does she foresee any actionable plans coming from the dialogue?
Would a national dialogue lead to actionable plans? Ideally, yes. And I'm inclined to say yes, that it will. And just because of this, so I'm going to go back to my own work as a dialogue practitioner. So when we enter into communities, we work with targeted communities, by the way, for a sustained period of time. So but between 3 and 5 years, we'll work with one community. So when we enter into that community, we want to know from the people we're working with, what are the issues that are most important to you, right? And we'll go through an entire dialogical process where we unpack that issue. We tear it apart, we try and understand it, understand how it manifests so that we can understand how do we resolve it. And we spend about a week's time with the community. We return time and again, but we spend about a week's time at a time with a particular community talking about this issue that is important to them. And before we leave, we will talk again about what it is that we need to do when we come back. So if we leave on a Friday we will sit down together, all of us, the practitioners, the dialogical practitioners, facilitators, plus the community will say, okay, let's write it down. When we come back, we need to have done this, we need to have done that, we need to have spoken to that one, we need to have reached out to that one. So there's always a plan that you formulate together so that when you return to the community as a facilitator, you have something more to work with, and you instill a level of trust within the community that you're working with, that this is not another talk shop, right? So there's always an actionable plan that follows each dialogical intervention. I do foresee that being the case here with this national dialogue process, even though I'm still unsure about how it's going to unfold. I do foresee there being actionable plans emerging from this process. What I am more skeptical about is the implementation of those plans. South Africa has incredible policy on a variety of issues. I think we are very progressive. We are very pro-working class in our policy. What we lack is the implementation. And that's what I think worries me and stresses me out the most. So once this process wraps up, and I'm sort of unclear about the timeline as well, but once this process wraps up, I do foresee an actionable plan emerging, but I don't know whether that actionable plan, that action plan will eventually be implemented. Because also there aren't really measures of accountability for non-implementation. I think that we struggle there as a country as well. So if people don't implement policies, there's no accountability, there's no penalization for them. And I think that's the issue that we're sitting with. Great policy, we'll definitely have a plan for moving forward, but will we actually implement the plan? I think that's the question that I have.
So I want to highlight this from Danielle's response. Yes, there would be actionable plans because most of the other plans in government, there is actionable plans. They even have budget allocations. The implementation thereof is going to be a little bit tricky. Now, there is a lot of people that would start pointing fingers at the ANC and say that the ANC is the culprit when it comes to service delivery implementation. Now, that is not entirely true. I live in the city of Cape Town, a DA-run metropolitan. I live in the Western Cape, a DA-run Western Cape, and I own properties in Matikama municipality, which is also a DA-led municipality. Now, if you go into those specific areas, you will see the same problems that you would find in other parts of the countries that is led by the ANC. So it's not just a problem of implementation on the ANC side, it's also a problem of implementation on the DA side. Now, from where I'm recording this particular episode, I am walking distance from an informal settlement. Now, since I started living in Cape Town, that informal settlement has been there. And since then, you haven't seen any change to that informal settlement, change for the better. The change that you do see is that is getting bigger. Now, there's people living in that particular informal settlement with rights. So if the DA is failing to do that, then they are not delivering on their constitutional mandate. This morning on the radio, there was also a report that Cape Town is bleeding again. Now, there's lately been a lot of gang-related violence in Cape Town, and many people have lost their lives. Policing is an issue that all three spheres of government has to adhere to. So the Western Cape, that is controlled by the DA, hasn't solved this issue of gang violence in the Cape. But if you go to your more affluent areas, where I think the majority of their base are living, you see a completely different side of the story. And I'm telling you that this is true because I live in those other parts of the city where you see the presence and the service delivery of the city in much better. So the implementation is not a one-sided thing. It's not a failure of the ANC. I would say currently, because the DA joined the ANC, it's a GNU problem. So it's not just a problem on the ANC side. So from that, I asked Danielle, as a dialogue practitioner, and she rightfully pointed out that she's a dialogue practitioner, and she's been working with this in 8 of the 9 provinces. So she has seen the underbelly of society more than I have. Now, they also pick up on very deep-seated issues that needs a lot of work. So knowing that this is a national dialogue, she's a dialogue practitioner. So I asked her, Danielle, what do you see missing from the national dialogue? And this is what she had to say.
So there are primarily 2 things as a dialogue practitioner that I see missing from this process. And number 1 is the most important thing, and that is the lack of citizen buy-in. For a process that is supposed to be citizen-led, to not have citizen buy-in, it's a bit worrying, and it sets a very bad precedent. It's giving very much destined to fail. Citizen buy-in is elementary, it is step 1. And I don't think that enough work has been done in terms of explaining to South Africans why this is so important, why this is so needed, and getting them to buy into this process and to want to be involved and a part of this process. And I don't think even if that had been done, even if there were several campaigns and ads about why citizens should be participating in the national dialogue process, I don't even think that would have been enough, because there's such a gross lack of trust between South African citizens and their government. I think whatever the government would have said would have just flown over people's head and people would have rolled their eyes. So yeah, citizen buy-in is lacking. And in order for a process to work, a dialogical process to work, you need buy-in from the stakeholders. If there's no buy-in, it's not going to work. It's not going to sustain itself. Just drop the whole thing. You may as well just leave it. Otherwise, you risk looking like you're forcing people to do something, and no one likes to be forced to do something. People are going to, the second they feel like they're being forced to do something, they're going to kick against you and they're going to resist, and that's the last thing that you want, right? So yeah, citizen buy-in is the first thing. Another thing that I see missing as a dialogue practitioner is clarity. And as someone who is both a practitioner in the field, but also someone who's neurodivergent, clarity and structure is very important to me. I need to know what to expect. I need to know where this is going. And right now, things feel very opaque, very up in the air, very unclear, and that stresses me out. So, what was I going to say? When we talk about when the process ends, right? When everything wraps up, this process concludes, what happens then? Where to from there? Right now, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen once the national dialogue process concludes. That's them, but even now, people have been talking about a toolkit that's meant to be disseminated into communities. There's supposed to be an app that South Africans can also feed data into. I have no information about this toolkit or this app. and I work in dialogue. So that's also very, very worrying for me. It's just how confusing and unclear things are. It feels like we're just, things are sort of just unfolding as it goes, and we're all just rolling with the punches. I would appreciate a lot more structure and a lot more clarity in terms of how much is this going to cost, by the way, and where's the money going to come from. There have been conversations about this coming from the DPME, but that's not confirmed. NEDLAC did contribute to the convention this past weekend, I'm told, but there's 450 million rand that needs to be spent, 60% of which needs to come from government. Which government department is going to pay for that? Is it going to be the DPME? We don't know. So that not knowing causes a lot of stress and anxiety in people like me who would appreciate a lot more clarity, because where there's clarity, there is accountability, or there's more, where there's clarity, you're able to hold people accountable. Where things are vague and up in the air, you're less able to hold people accountable. So yeah, that's a bit stressful, and I see that that's missing.
Clarity is one of the things that stood out for Danielle, and I agree. And this brings me to that first question that I've asked: what is the point of all of this, of the national dialogue? So, if it is to develop a new plan, if it's to develop our democracy, why don't you take some time, come up with a better process, and then think about how to do it, how to do it differently? And it's that clarity that have decided, that clarity that is missing, that the legacy organizations have decided that we are not going to be part of this particular national dialogue, because it's really not going to benefit the people. So in that context, we need to look at the withdrawal of the legacy organizations. That is not for the benefit of the people. It is for the benefit of a specific group of people that is now currently in government. So I then asked Danielle, seeing that there is some things missing from the national dialogue, what would she have done differently? And this is what Danielle had to say.
I like that you put in the question, as a dialogue practitioner, Because as a dialogue practitioner, meaning this work is already happening. There are already dialogue workshops and interventions happening around this country, being facilitated by organizations like the one that I'm a part of. The work is already happening. We are already in conversation with one another as South Africans. Can this work be scaled up? Absolutely. That will require monetary resources and human resources, but the work is already happening. What we lack as civil society and also as the organization that I'm part of is a feedback loop. So, as I said, I've worked in several communities across this country for a number of years, and I have a wealth of data that I'm sitting with. And I've not been able to feed that data into the places where it most needs to go. So I can write policy briefs and I can write papers, and if I happen to see a town manager or ward councillor or who else, a premier somewhere, that's great, but I have no real way of tracking whether or not the data I have, the data that communities feed me, is actually making a difference in policy, which will then actually make a difference in their lives. So that feedback loop is missing. If this national dialogue was of such importance, and I also doubt that, I'm a bit skeptical. I'm aware that next year is local elections, and I'm aware that the ANC cannot afford to lose even more support. But if this dialogue was so important, that money, since it's there somewhere, I'm told that it's part of the DPME's objectives. So anyway, the money is there. If that money exists, then feed it back into the civil society sector, feed it back into communities who are already busy doing the work, right? And then create a feedback loop in which they can feed this data into the relevant departments, into the relevant minister's email inbox, so that we can actually start making tangible material change in people's lives. I think I would have definitely done that differently. I don't think that we need to be doing things from scratch, reinventing the wheel, which this feels a bit like. I think that we need to be supporting organizations that are already busy doing dialogical work. And then just creating an infrastructure where that data then gets fed to the relevant governmental or departmental stakeholders who make the necessary changes that will then positively affect the communities where those organizations work. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, that's how I would have done things differently. I'm so sorry, it's very loud here where I am. It is a Monday and I'm recording it. Yeah, and it's the beginning of the week. People are up and about. Yeah.
So civil society have been doing a lot of amazing work in South Africa. And they have been doing this work since before 1994, and even in post-apartheid South Africa, they have been doing it. But one of the things that hamper the works of civil society is the availability of funds. Now, people like Danielle and Danielle's organization, they rely on donor funding. And in many cases, those donor funding are from outside. So governments from outside is giving, organizations from outside are giving civil societies in South Africa money to implement service delivery issues in South Africa that the South African government is collecting tax for. And then this is the biggest thing that doesn't sit well with me. There is organizations that are doing amazing work, but they don't have the resources, or they don't get the resources that government, especially the ministries, are getting. And when you look at the Auditor General reports, then you see there's a lot of wasteful expenditure and irregular expenditure in these various municipalities, provincial governments, and ministries. Wasteful expenditure means that you cannot account for that specific money, and it wasn't spent towards service delivery. So that is the reality that civil society are facing in South Africa. So seeing that they're doing this amazing work, we need to think as a citizen collective, or as citizens, we have to think about how can we help civil society to do more of the amazing work that they're currently doing. Now, this is my take on the whole national dialogue situation. After listening to Danielle and Danielle's responses, this is my particular take on the issue. These people that concocted this idea of a national dialogue, they really don't have a clue what is currently happening in South Africa. They don't have a clue. And I am certain they don't have a clue because those documents and those plans that are drawn up by consultants. And these consultants then give it to these councils and these politicians, and they present it to whoever, they approve it, and there you have a plan. They lack the understanding of those specific plans. So if you start reading those plans, you would see, okay, it's really good plans, it's actionable, you can do something about it, and you can allocate the resources to it. But the people who have to understand those documents and implement it, they don't have an understanding of those documents. So they don't know what they're doing. I don't think they even read the policies that when they come in power. I don't think they read any of the budgets. They read the policies, the bylaws, any of the plans, even the IDP. I don't think they read any of these documents. So they don't have an understanding. The only voice that is in their ear is that of the politician. Their political bodies that got them onto the list. Even their election manifestos they don't have an understanding of those election manifestos because some consultant or consultancy have written those manifestos for them. So they say they want all of these things, but those are lengthy documents, and if you have to question any canvasser or politician on what is written in those documents, I don't think they would be able to provide an answer for you. So they don't have an understanding. So when Guedemantashe was looking up like this, he couldn't believe what was happening because they are under the impression that they know everything because the people will support them because they said they're going to do X, Y, and Z. But the people got clever. Now, do I support the national dialogue? Not really. I don't see a point in it. But if we can have a conversation as to how we can make government more responsive to the people, then I will gladly join the national dialogue. Because I think it's time that we change our electoral system. We need to change our electoral system to make it more responsive to the people. Currently, if we look at the makeup of political representatives in government, then we see there's only one representative that is directly elected by the people, and that's the ward councillor. The rest of the political representatives in legislatures are chosen by the political party. So the political party would stack people on the list that is in their cabal, that forward the interests of the cabal and not the interests of the people. So if you look at the election results, then you would see, especially when it comes to ward councillor, that there is always a changeover of ward councillor. It's rarely that you see the one ward councillor dominating elections. If people are tired of you, they will get rid of you and they will vote for someone else. That is direct elections. And that's where the people have the strongest say in who is going to represent us in this particular ward. And I want our electoral system to change that specific system. And I think our democracy is now mature enough to go back to a constituency-based elections where representatives for parliament and various legislatures are directly elected by the people. I am also playing with the idea that the president of the country needs to be directly elected by the people. But to do all of that, we have to amend the constitution. And currently, there is no unity in the GNU, so I don't think this particular option is even available in the future. So then, ladies and gentlemen, the reality is they're not going to amend the constitution to make government more responsive to the people because there's no unity in the national government. So we are stuck with this type of politics for I don't know how long. Maybe up until a collapse. I don't know. But we're stuck in this particular position. So ladies and gentlemen, that's why I don't see there's any point in the national dialogue. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next episode.